It came in under the radar, but it's stayed on multiple screens ever since, and soon it will leave the buffalo its critics claim it threatened. A terrible 3 days for a former Arkansas lawmaker, fresh evidence that the broader scandal will linger for months. One aspect of a different sort of controversy ends, though the man at the center of it suggests he's hardly through talking. And also in this edition, its 10th anniversary fast approaching. It still has its critics, though its beneficiaries likely are not among them. The Arkansas Lottery at the decade mark, coming up on Arkansas Week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We begin this edition with one of perhaps the biggest environmental controversy in recent Arkansas history, a commercial swine farm near the Buffalo National River. Too near, the river's advocates insisted. The risk of pollution too great. Late this week, big news from Governor Hutchinson. It will take months and some $6 million of taxpayer money, but the hog operation is on its way out. With a moratorium on new permits in place and the farm's permit renewal pending, there have been some hints from the governor of late, including on this network, hints that the farm's days were limited.
They got the permit long before the moratorium, and they've tried to manage it well. So we've got to deal with that separately, but we want them to make sure they comply with all the environmental regulations, and that's why before they get the permit renewed, they got to make sure the engineering work is done, that all the safeguards are in place, and that our environmental regulators are satisfied with it.
Is that a yes or a no, sir? I have to ask.
Well, do I want large-scale hog farms in the Buffalo River?
Right.
No, not in that watershed.
Mr. Hutchinson's predecessor, as I recall, gentlemen, once lamented that that permit was the great regret of his administration. Anyway, now on to it. Benji Hardy joins us, an independent journalist. Michael Hiblin, news director at KUAR, Public Radio Central Arkansas. It will take months and a lot of taxpayer dollars, but no more watershed.
Right, yeah, I mean, it's a victory for advocates, environmental advocates that have argued for years this was unacceptable to have this sort of operation in the watershed. It's sort of interesting to think of the role of the Arkansas Farm Bureau in all of this, because they have argued for years that this was not an environmental threat, that the permits were issued correctly. I mean, the battle lines between farming interests and environmental interests got drawn in a way on this. The Farm Bureau sort of had no choice but to fight this issue.
Right.
But I mean, in a way, they may be relieved on some level that this is no longer a fight that they.
Yeah, one suspects they were on the battle lines pretty stark. Michael.
Yeah, $6.2 million that the state will pay. The governor made this announcement during an event on Thursday, and excuse me for expressing a little opinion, but I was up at the Buffalo National River last weekend, my first time being up there in 35 years, and it's truly a beautiful treasure for the state, and for it to be at risk, really, because as we were saying before the broadcast, you've got the pond where the waste is kept, and it eventually, you can imagine flooding or something, or the manure pond fails, walls, it was such a risk having this swine operation up there. And so obviously this is a big victory for environmentalists and just people who love the Buffalo National River.
Yeah, and in fairness to the operators, we would note that Mr. Hutchinson was at pains to point out that the entire permitting process, which occurred several years ago, he was also at pains to point out under a previous administration it was approved, there were no illegalities, and that the operators of the farm had adhered to all the pertinent regulations. That said, he wanted it out.
Right, and the permit had expired that they were
Yeah.
operating under. I mean, this was the Department of Environmental Quality had said that that they were not going to renew that permit, but then the operators were working under an expired permit for the past several months, since I believe November. And the litigation on this was just going to drag out, I mean, for the foreseeable future. So this wraps it up in a way that I think, I mean, everybody's probably somewhat relieved about.
Yeah, far from being wrapped up. The legislative scandal that stemmed from, well, there were several moving parts of it. But former Senator Hutchinson back in federal court this past week, facing criminal charges in not one but two states, Arkansas and Missouri, and a pretty grueling 2 days for the senator.
Right. Yeah. Many moving parts is an understatement. There's so many different facets to this. Yes, in court this week, former State Senator Jeremy Hutchinson, that is the governor's nephew, over a fairly narrow set of issues about misuse of campaign funds. I believe some $150,000 that federal prosecutors say that he appropriated for his personal use. And then there's some related federal tax charges that stem out of that. Of course, if you're using that, this campaign money you're not supposed to for your own personal income, that leads to some tax issues as well. So this was a pre-trial hearing. He's supposed to go to trial in July, and this hearing sort of was supposed to concern only the admission of a particular piece of evidence, but that led to days of testimony by Hutchinson's ex-wife, and then sort of most explosively of his former girlfriend, who he claims stole this laptop that contained key evidence that sparked this whole investigation. And she claims that the laptop was a gift from Hutchinson to her. The story that emerged in court is that back in 2012, Julie McGee, Hutchinson's former girlfriend, went to the FBI, apparently partly on the advice of Dan Greenberg, a former political rival of Hutchinson's and an attorney who was advising her, and presented the FBI with information that indicated that Hutchinson had misused campaign funds. He spent a lot of that money on her, and including making up a job, according to her, and buying a cruise for her and her family, and so on. Among the other things that she told the FBI back in 2012 is that Hutchinson allegedly was performing legislative favors for his employer at the time, John Goodson, who's a class action attorney in Texarkana, and now I believe is the chair of the U of A Board of Trustees. Goodson has denied those allegations pretty categorically in the days since.
And the estranged husband of a Supreme Court justice.
Correct, yes, of Supreme Court Justice Courtney Goodson. This goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
But just to wrap this up, this piece up, so Jeremy Hutchinson, attempted to have this evidence suppressed. The judge has yet to rule on that, but it seems as though, unless she makes a surprise ruling, we're headed towards a trial in July for him.
Yeah. The takeaway, it seems to me, is that despite the fervent wishes of his former colleagues in the Arkansas General Assembly, this story isn't going to go away for, frankly, years. We keep adding new names to it, rightly or wrongly, fairly or unfairly. Mr. Goodson, the attorney in Texarkana, Dan Greenberg's name comes into it, and heaven only knows where it's going to go next. Some of the individuals who are cooperating with the FBI or with the Justice Department are weeks, months away from being sentenced. Presumably they're chatting with the FBI even as we speak.
One of the surprising things that came out this week was that Hutchinson himself had been cooperating extensively with the FBI as early as 2014. And he, when confronted with these allegations of improprieties with his campaign funds, initially agreed to be an informant for investigators, and then they dropped him a few years later when they decided that he had been untruthful in certain matters and was continuing to, quote, commit criminal acts, according to the agent who took the stand in this week's hearing.
Got to move on. Michael, the Arkansas Supreme Court and a certain circuit judge in Pulaski.
Yeah, Pulaski County Circuit Judge Wendell Griffin. He had been basically because of his participation in a death penalty protest 2 years ago, had been investigated and had an ethics complaint pending against him. It was to begin a trial on Thursday, but the judge's attorneys learned it had been delayed over the weekend, and then on Wednesday, the Judicial Discipline and Disability Commission said that it had decided to dismiss the charges because it had waited too long to bring this case to trial. It said that it was not a reflection of the merits of the case, but that they had waited too long. You had two out-of-state attorneys who had been brought in to prosecute Judge Griffin, and they had just some outside issues that delayed this, health reasons and other factors. But I spoke with Judge Griffin on Wednesday. He was very animated about this, told me that this whole saga has never been about ethical conduct or the correctness of the legal ruling that he made when he granted a temporary restraining order that halted the state from using one of the lethal injection drugs. But just hours after making that ruling, he then took part in this death penalty protest where he was photographed lying on a cot, looking like a condemned inmate, wearing an anti-death penalty button, and surrounded by people holding signs against the death penalty. The key issue for him now is that shortly after this protest took place, the state Supreme Court took away his ability to consider death penalty cases. And Judge Griffin is adamant now that he should have that ability restored, and that if he doesn't get that power restored, that he will file suit against the Arkansas Supreme Court. I reached out to the Chief Justice and a couple of other justices on the court, got no response, but he feels this is a vindication.
He is a man of his word. Everyone, I think, would grant Judge Griffin that, so we have to assume that fairly soon he will be back in. He's really never left the public arena.
No, and he'll, I'm sure, continue to be very vocal, and very public, sharing his beliefs. So we'll see. But we don't know yet what the state Supreme Court obviously will do. We expect to get actually some kind of written order from the Judicial Discipline and Disability Commission in the coming days.
Well, the judge's Judge Griffin's exercising of his First Amendment rights infuriated a great many in the General Assembly, and there was open discussion of impeachment. That the referral more or less headed that off.
Yeah, and he said that this, he did not have any, that his feelings about the death penalty did not interfere with his ruling in this case. It was a drug maker that didn't want its drug to be one of the 3 drugs used in the lethal injection process, and he basically felt that he was justified when he issued this restraining order that said the property had been wrongfully obtained by the state, wrongfully withheld, and ordered that it be preserved, not disposed of, until he had a full evidentiary hearing. His decision was eventually overturned. This was April 2017 when the state had scheduled 8 executions before one of the lethal injection drugs expired. 4 of those executions did take place.
Guess who's moving back to Arkansas? We've got a couple of minutes remaining. Benji?
Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and we'll see what she does then. If Donald Trump has his way, she'll run for governor in 2022.
Yeah, well, really big smooch.
Yeah, would certainly stir things up in the state, change things up a lot. A rather surprising announcement, I guess. But the former governor, Mike Huckabee, said on Fox News this morning that he doesn't know what her plans are. He doesn't think she knows what her plans are. But obviously, there are a number of people thinking about this. Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin, one who he pretty much, it's appeared, has been sitting on the sidelines and would like to become governor, I think. So we'll see, but it would be very...
They've been running for 5 years, some people would argue.
At least.
Yeah. So we'll see, but very interesting that she's returning to Arkansas.
And one might say the same thing about Attorney General Rutledge, who has, it's widely assumed, was considering the race.
Yeah, I mean, in a hypothetical,
quite a primary.
Right. In a hypothetical three-way primary between the three of them, there's just no doubt who has the most name recognition among average Arkansas voters. So
but that's still 2022.
Sure.
So part of this also might depend on what the legacy of Donald Trump is at that point.
Yeah. Got to end it right there. We'll take a quick break and be right back. And we're back. There were some early stumbles, among them its controversial founding director and his unconventional compensation and the contracts he negotiated. But in a few weeks, the Arkansas Scholarship Lottery will observe its 10th birthday. For almost as long, its second director has been at the helm, and now he's here at our desk. Bishop Woosley, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
You're about to set, if the trend lines hold, and if I've done the math correctly, you're about to set a record for a second consecutive year.
We are.
Revenues.
Yeah, we are. We'll end up about probably $10 or $12 million above where we were last year, which was the first time we crossed the $500 million mark.
What's driving it? A better economy, or?
Probably a better economy. About 4 years ago, we went under the executive branch. I think we just have a little bit more time to concentrate on what we're supposed to be doing as far as some of the controversy. And that insulation has helped quite a bit. And I think we've just done a better job. The staff has really buckled down to do a lot better.
Well, in terms of fluctuations, do you see that with the economy, though, in terms of revenues?
You know, we do. When we first started up, we were in one of the biggest recessions that we've had in years and years and years. So they often say lotteries are kind of recession-proof. But you do see it. I mean, you know, 2 weeks ago when we had the floods, our sales went down. If it rains heavy on a Friday night, we may lose $200,000 in sales. So there are all kinds of things that affect us. And, you know, over the long term, you just kind of ride it out.
Well, in terms of achieving revenue goals or keeping the revenue flow constant or presumably increasing.
Yeah.
What's the strategy? Is there one?
Well, you got to do what you do just as well as you can do it. We've got an instant ticket game program that is second to none. It's 80% of our revenue is our scratch-off tickets. So we concentrate on those and do as well as we can. It's a never-ending situation. We release about 50 of them a year. So you have to stay on top of it. It's kind of what have you done for me lately, because you really are trying to make the best of what you did last month or last year. So we are now at that point where it is strictly just incremental growth. You're trying to do better in your retail situation where you have your tickets in place and you have them for sale, maybe recruit a few more retailers. It is just a little bit here and there that we're concentrating on right now.
Your agency doesn't really, the lottery itself doesn't get to award scholarship. You just collect the dough.
Correct.
But you are nonetheless, the lottery itself is assisting with several scholarship programs now.
Yeah, we started.
Revenues go to.
Absolutely. We started out with the Arkansas Academic Challenge Scholarship, which is what is known as the Lottery Scholarship. About 2 years ago, there was a Workforce Challenge Scholarship that was put into place, which is kind of in that workforce push that we're having here in Arkansas. And then in this last session, they started a concurrent challenge scholarship, which is a situation where a student is taking some college courses during their high school time that would be paid. So right now we're kind of all over the place. Those two have not really started yet, but we are designated to fund those, so the challenge will never stop.
Here's a look at numbers which were provided, of course, by the lottery agency itself, which will kind of summarize where you are, where the lottery is at this point. More than 500,000 scholarships thus far awarded. Almost $1 billion worth of scholarships. The prizes, approaching $3 billion in prizes that have been awarded, and then commissions to retailers for handling the tickets and the transactions themselves. What about
$250 million or
$250 million, yeah, in that ballpark. Not bad.
Not bad. You think about the impact across the state. We've got 1,900 retailers. We've paid them almost $250 million in commissions. They've got increased traffic coming in the stores. Obviously, 500 some odd thousand people have been affected by the scholarship. $2.8 million in prizes that have been paid out to Arkansans. So across the gamut, we've touched a lot of people here in Arkansas.
And yet, one of the, maybe the lingering, whatever moral or philosophical objections the lottery's critics may have had and still maintain, they continue this criticism, and that is the percentage of revenues that the lottery is able to devote to scholarships, that it funnels through the state education department. You've averaged on a 10-year average, a bit less than 20%. How to get that higher? Is that too high?
I think
too low. I'm sorry.
I think you don't concentrate on the percentage. You concentrate on the cash. So if you go back about 4 years ago, we returned about $72 million, which was our all-time low. I think that ended up being somewhere around 18%. This year, we're going to return about $97 million. That's going to be about 19.4%. You think about the percentage difference, that's not that much. If we were to go to 25, which is what our critics want us to go to, that money's going to come from prizes. And if we take the prizes out of our games, our sales are going to just go away completely. And therefore, we're going to return much less. You may get 25%, but you're going to get 60 million instead of 90 million. So that's kind of the fallacy in that argument. I want it to be 25 or 30% just so people will stop criticizing us for it. But ultimately, the amount of cash we're returning is what's important.
They are critical also, some of the critics, of the contracts with supply purveyors, the vendors that you rely on for tickets and other apparatus. They're too lucrative, they contend.
Well,
are they too generous?
No. In 2012, when I came in, I have amended those contracts at least twice since then. So we've gone, in one contract, we've gone from 2.45% of sales to 2.11. That's about $3 million a year. In one contract, we've gone from 1.89 all the way down to 1.3% of sales. So we've saved, over the course of time, probably $10 million. We've reduced staff from 85 to 66, salaries over $1 million a year, and our contracts drop $2 or $3 million a year. So from the standpoint of savings and operating lean, and that's what the governor wants us to do, I don't know that we could operate any leaner. We've done an excellent job of making sure the most money goes to scholarships as possible.
Well, you've got competition coming. You already had 2 pari-mutuel tracks and whatever they call it at Hot Springs. Now you're going to have casinos at West Memphis up and running, I think, at Oglon, Hot Springs. Pine Bluff is next, and who knows what's going to happen at Russellville. But the competition for the wagering dollar is about to go up again. How are you going to counter that? Are you concerned about it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they often say a lottery player is not a casino player is not a lottery player. The good thing we have going is there's not mobile betting, so to speak. So you're going to have to be on that location to spend money. But all of those are destination type situations, and people are going to go there and they're going to spend money because they may stay a night or two. There's going to be
no
a
hotel with a lottery.
There's going to be a restaurant. I don't offer that. The good thing is if you're in Lone Oak or you're in Searcy and you want to play lottery, you're not going to drive down to Pine Bluff. You're not going to drive over to West Memphis to play. But in Arkansas, there's just so much discretionary money. And when we're fighting for that money, we're fighting against shopping. We're fighting against the movies. So you're just adding another situation where money is being pulled from that. So we're just going to have to do better with what we do. I mean, that has always been our plan. We haven't really expanded over the 10 years. We kind of have done what we've done. And so we're going to have to do better with that.
We're out of time. Bishop Ousley, thanks very much for being with us. Bishop Ousley, Director of the Arkansas Lottery. That's all the time we've got for this week. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.